something is new here, and it's definitely my filming setup. The only thing that's different about today's video. You guys know what month it is. What month? Excuse me? What the video is. Because you guys clicked on it. So I know that you guys used your little reading skills that you use, okay, that you watch me for. I don't actually think that makes sense. But I know that you guys used your reading comprehension skills to figure out that this is my June wrap up. Because when else? And what else? I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read this month, obviously, and how I made a comeback this month. Because if you were keeping up with me last month, you might have seen that I actually was in a pretty big book slump. I read 2 books last month, which is still a lot. Any book is a lot. 1 book is a lot. But from like my usual statistics, it was a big jump. So we have been slowly climbing back up the ladder with reads and everything. So let's get into some statistics. I'm going to put them up on the screen because I actually did not come prepared today and have all of them set out. So look up on the screen. I'll wait for you to read them. Don't worry, we'll be here. No, don't worry, just take your time. No, totally cool. Totally cool. Just sit and read them. So can't wait till I see them, because I'm going to be the one making them. With all of that being said, let's just dive into the books that I read in June. I picked up the ROM Commerce by Heartless Hunter. This was actually my book club's book pick. Smooth yet subtle plug. We have a Discord that's always linked down below. It's the We Read That Discord. My mods, my lovely, lovely, amazing, hardworking mods have made that to be everything spectacular that it is. It is a book community for you guys to chat in. You guys can chat about books. There's a bunch of different channels and everything, even just like that aren't about books. There's so much, and every month we pick a book pick and we read it together. And actually we pick the 4 selections over on my Patreon, where we also do a little bit of stuff for the book club over there. So all of that to say, this was this month's book pick, and I read this when I was still very much in the slump and lost all of the footage that I had of me reading this book. So now I just get to gush about it to you guys, because I definitely gave this book a 4.5 stars. It was so close to a 5, but there were like little things that the guy did in the book that like I just couldn't come back from, that weren't a big deal, but like couldn't make it a 5-star for me. Because like a 5-star is like, I love everything. Like I love every little thing. This one was pretty dang close, y'all. Hello, I was about to call this Hello Stranger. Did I call this Hello Stranger when I first started talking about it? I hope not. Anyway, so this book, we're following Emma and we're following Charlie. Now, Emma is this screenwriter, and she's been trying to get her stuff sold for a while, and then basically she falls into this job with Charlie where they start writing this rom-com together. And it's actually a lot more than that. Something about Heartless Hunter's books is that she always uses these like super light and fluffy like plot lines and disguises them in some emotional depth. Okay, they are never as simple as it seems. This one was just honestly such a good time. Their banter and things that they did for each other, and the emotional feelings that the 2 characters shared with each other, so many like ups and downs that we went through with these characters, they felt very real, and I felt like the relationship was just fun. It was a fun read. I like in my romances to have a strong emotional plot, a strong romance plot, and this one had it all, and they were genuinely like helping each other, and the little things, like little tiny things, like he literally made these like homemade donuts for her on her birthday, and he like called her. Just little acts of service goes a long way with me with my male main love interests in books, and I just loved them, especially like the love proclamation scene in this one. I thought was just so cute and adorable, and I had a really good time reading it. Then I picked up Heartless Hunter. I actually kind of forgot that I even read this, and I did give this a 4-star, because now that I'm looking at it, now that I'm really looking at her, I don't know. Now that like I'm looking at it and I'm getting my memory refreshed on reading it, I remember I had a little bit of a hard time getting into this one at first. When you're following Rune, and she is a witch, but she has some like traumatic, I don't know why I said it like that. She has like a traumatic past. Basically in this world, they hate witches and they kill them, and so she's kind of like living this life in hiding, and then basically the romance is with a witch hunter. It was a little bit hard for me to get into at first. I don't know why. I guess I just wasn't super interested in the story. I felt like we weren't getting anywhere, and then I did start getting more and more interested, and I will say that I still felt like we weren't getting anywhere in the story for a little bit of it, which is why it's a 4-star, was because I feel like if we actually moved along with the plot at all, which I don't feel like we did throughout this whole entire book, it would have been like way higher. Even for it being a more like slow moving book, I will say that I really enjoyed the chemistry between the two characters. I am a sucker for enemies to lovers, secret identities, enemies to lovers. Like, I eat that up. And once I got into the book, I could not put it down. Like, I think it took me until about, like, I forget how long it took me to get into it, but once I was into it, I literally read it in one sitting. This is definitely a book that I would recommend to people in the future. If somebody asked a fantasy recommendation for somebody who's trying to get into it, I would definitely recommend this one. Next up, I picked up The Ministry of Time. This one was definitely a risk for me because this is a sci-fi book, and it's actually up for one of the Goodreads like best sci-fis of the year so far. And I will say that I wholeheartedly agree. I gave this one a 4.5 stars as well. Basically, you're following our main character, and she works at the Ministry of Time, I think it's called, or they just call it the Ministry. But is it called the Ministry of Time? It was always the Ministry in my head. But basically what they're doing is they have built this time machine, and they're going back in time, and they're taking like random people from history already like were going to die, and they take them and put them in the future, and they kind of see how they're doing in like when they get put in the future. So her job is to be a bridge. So basically she gets assigned with one of the people that they took from the past. She has to help him get acclimated to modern day. And it was just honestly such an interesting read because on one hand you did have like little sparks and breadcrumbs of like a romance where you're like, okay, am I just reading this because I'm a romance reader, or is there some romance in here? And then you also had the sci-fi heavy side of it where you're talking about the ministry and the tests that they're doing and why they're doing this. And then you also just have these heavy, deep relationships that the characters build, like the people from the past and the people from the present, and even the other people talking to each other. And there's also a whole lot of messaging and themes within this book that you can take away from it. And also there is a very powerful quote towards the end of the book where we're talking about grief and it being its own like sense of a time machine. And there were just so many quotes in this book where as I was reading it, I literally was like, ooh, I know I'm going to want to reread this book at some point because I wish that I like already would have been annotating in it, but I was like so far into it that I, thought I'll just reread it one day because it was that enjoyable to me. The writing in this book is spectacular. I think that it was very well done. This is a debut novel, by the way, and it is so well written. I feel like the characters felt like real people. You were sitting here and very enthralled into the story. I will say the only reason it wasn't a 5 is because the story is very slow moving at times, and sometimes I didn't mind that at all because it just felt like we were like watching these characters from this other time period learn stuff about modern day and try to get used to it, and it was kind of like a little bit of comedic relief, and it was very heartwarming. But there were some moments where I was like, okay, like maybe even when we were getting to like the sci-fi stuff that I was like, okay, you're kind of losing me a little bit, like we're getting too much into it. It is a sci-fi novel, but that still leaves a big question mark in sci-fi in my head because obviously when it was like sci-fi heavy, I was a little bit more bored. I don't know, but this one was 4.5. I would definitely recommend everybody read it. Here's the thing. Here's where I'll get into this. I didn't say this at the beginning, but I'll say it now. I feel like this month is probably my best reading month out of the year. And that is not because of the amount of books I read. It's because of the ratings that came out of this month. Like, for example, we are literally sitting at a 4 and above star for every single book that I've talked about. And I found 2 5-star reads this month, and I think the last time I did that was in April. Was that April when I found 2 5-star reads just for the summer and wild love? Was that April or was that March, guys? I don't know. I can't remember. But that being said, I just thought that was a spider and it was Lent. Had a little mini heart attack. Okay. First 5-star read that I found this month, if you guys didn't watch this video, I read Lovely War and gave it a 5 stars. Now I will say, this is where it like opens my eyes to being like, sometimes it's the books that you least expect to be 5 stars that come out and surprise you when they're 5 stars. This one, it's a young adult historical fiction with some romance. Basically, you are being told these 2 different love stories, and it's told by the perspective of like different Greek gods and goddesses, but it's majorly told by Aphrodite, and she like gets some help from like the other Greek gods. And I will say, if you don't know anything about Greek mythology, it's literally not a problem because even they like will give you like a little bit of background that you may like need to know in order to like know their character. It's told in that point of view, and it takes place in the early 1900s, and it takes place during the huge war that is going on. It is just, I can't even put into words. Like, when editing the video that I read this in, I was brought to tears again, reading some of the quotes that literally made me cry in the video. Like, this is a book that made me sob. Like, sob. It was just so beautiful in the way these characters were. It was so wholesome and heartwarming and genuine. Like, these characters felt genuine. And here's the thing about my book taste personally. When we're talking about a romance, I love that, like, respectful, deeply in love, so enamored by each other. It's deeply emotional. Like, it's bone deep emotional depth within these characters for their romance. This one it felt just like that. Like, you could feel these characters. It wasn't because of anything else except genuinely like two souls being attracted to each other and loving each other and communicating and wanting to see them, and just like that's all you're thinking about. Even in the midst of all of these like terrible, awful things that are going on, love prevails through everything. It is just such a strong story, but it's not even just love within relationships. There's also friendship talked about multiple times in this book. Like, there are multiple friendships shown in depictions of like different ways and different things that happen in friendships, and just how your love for this person can be so deep. It was just such an amazing book, and also it was very poetic. I thought it was beautiful. Like, I loved it. Also, me just slipping back through this, like, their banter was also just like not in the same way that like Emily Henry banter is, but it's in that like cute and wholesome banter where you're just like, it reminds you of almost like when you watch The Notebook and the way that they communicate with each other. Like, it's that type of banter. Just so cute. I don't know. It's just so wholesome and cute, and such a powerful, devastatingly heartbreaking and beautiful story wrapped all in one. Next up, I picked up Beautiful Boy. This is basically a memoir from a dad who is telling his perspective of his son's struggle with addiction, stories of helping his son through rehab and then in and out of rehab, and what happened in the middle, and just the beginning of the story, everything about it. So we're dealing with a son, which is a very triggering subject that is talked about heavily in detail all throughout the story, of how his son struggles with addiction and his, point of view perspective and his circumstances with that, and how he lived through that. Loving somebody as much as you love your son and seeing them battle with this thing that you want so badly to help him with. It was very, very powerful and very moving. I cried multiple times. Like, it was just such a beautiful story. This story is so powerful and thought-provoking. Like, I really found it so interesting. I listened to a lot of it via audiobook. I read the last little bit of it in the physical form. Listening to it was just such a powerful, gripping story, honestly, and I really want to read The Son also as a book of his point of view of struggling with addiction. And also, something that I liked was that he had a lot of facts in this book. Like, he did a lot of research. Even while trying to help his son, he went to seek out more outlets to be more educated on what was happening to his son because of how much he wanted to help him. And I feel like that prevails throughout this whole entire book, and I feel like it's a book that everybody needs to read. And like I said, I would really wanting to pick up the son's book and his point of view, because I think that it is, very important to read somebody's perspective who has dealt with these things. Beautiful Boy, absolute masterpiece. The movie is too. Please read this and then watch the movie. And then I picked up Rebecca. I'm gonna say it again. This is a book that inspired Tolerate It by Taylor Swift, and if you guys know me, you guys know Tolerate It is one of my favorite songs, definitely one of my favorite Taylor Swift songs, one of my favorite songs of all time. The deep okay, this is not time for me to rant about my favorite Taylor Swift songs. This was a classic going into it. It is considered a classic. I didn't know that. And then I started reading it, and then I went on TikTok to see if anybody's ever talked about this book. I guess it's not on my For You page that I see a lot of like discourse over classics, so I don't see it a whole lot. I went and seeked it out, and people love Rebecca, and that's how I found out it was a classic. So kind of went into it like, okay, gonna read a classic for the first time since high school. Like, this is the first classic that I'm going to finish, and I will tell you guys, I gave this a 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I would say from a beginner's perspective, if you are wanting to look for a book that is pretty beginner friendly to get into, this one. The writing is not difficult at all to understand, and that's one of my most scary things when going into classics is like, is the writing going to be too difficult for me? Am I not going to, understand the meaning behind these words and what they mean? This felt like, do you call them like film noir? Oh my gosh, I forgot the name of the movie, but I've watched this movie before and it kind of gave me these vibes. We're following the main character, and basically she gets married to this man and goes and lives at Manderley. And Manderley is this huge house, like think like just a big estate, and everybody talks about Manderley. It was good in its prime day. He had been married before and his wife is dead. So basically she starts to kind of be haunted by this idea of Rebecca. This book is so atmospheric. It is like I would like say it has that like gothic type of vibe to it, and I really ate that up. Like I really enjoyed it once we got into it and got to Manderley. It felt like Manderley was its own character. Like it had so much personality to it. The story was so interesting. The character relationships were really fun to dissect and be like, what are these people doing? The last like 30% of this book literally feels like I'm Alice falling down the hole to Wonderland. Like I was like, what is going on? It felt, again, so atmospheric throughout the whole entire book, and you're just following the storyline, trying to see where it leads. And I will say that I just really enjoyed it. I liked how it all unraveled at the end. People say that the ending is a little like open-ended, and I will just say, just go back and read the beginning of the page, which honestly, people literally say that the first page of this is like the best first page of any book. Okay guys, next up, I picked up my first John Green book since I was like 12, which is Looking for Alaska, which happens to be John Green's debut novel. I gave this one a 3-star. Okay, basically you are following our main character. What is his name? Miles? Oh my god. Miles was not my cup of tea. Are following Miles, and he is going to this school. It's kind of like a boarding school type of vibe in the South in Alabama. He is meeting this like group of friends that he then falls into their friend group, and you're just kind of following them. So this is kind of a coming of age story, but it's mixed in with the topic of mental health. It's a very important part of the story. I will say that being in this main character's point of view was actually kind of painful sometimes. Like reading in his point of view, he was such a dull, whiny character that it was literally the most irritating part of the whole entire book. And I enjoyed all of the other characters except for our main character. Is that purposeful? Is this like a device that it's like we're kind of using him as a lens to focus on these other characters? Because also it just felt like a story about everybody else except our main character, which again, maybe the whole entire point. Even with that, like stuff, I don't know. It just didn't hit for me. There's also this discussion of a labyrinth throughout the whole entire book, and it kind of comes full circle, and I really enjoyed that as well, and how that came back around at the end. Here's my dog, and she's gonna sit right where I don't need her to be. Looking for Alaska. Looking for a good rating. I still have 6 books to get through. Wow. We have The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. And here's the thing, I didn't even know that Lucy Foley had a new thriller out. Me and Lucy Foley, I think 2 times now before this book, we were not getting along. If you guys are around a lot, you may know that I give authors a 3 strikes and you're out rule. Basically, I will try an author's work 3 times, 3 different works of their fiction. If I don't vibe with it, then I'm just like, you know what, this author is just not for me. Like, we're just not gonna vibe. Because I feel like if you have 3 straight books that you do not rate them highly, then they're just probably not for you. So this was Lucy Foley's last chance. The Midnight Feast. I actually audiobooked most of this, and I actually ended up giving this a 1.5 star. Hated this book, and I don't want to go too hard in on this book because honestly I did the mood reading vlog where I read this in, and I feel like I kind of went hard on that book, so I don't want to do it here. Not thrilling at all. Not suspenseful. Plot twist was stupid and very predictable, and the story felt extremely flat for me. Nothing was like high stakes. I didn't feel thrilled or interested at all, and I just rolled my eyes once I finished the book. Sometimes you have to find a 1.5 to find a 5-star read. I will gush about this book right here. I will say that I did go in on my mood reading vlog, so if you want to see me like read this book and have like real-time fresh reactions to it, but this one, we are following Allie. And here's the thing. In this book, which is summer romance, Annabelle, how are you going to market this book as a summer romance? Oh, just cute, light, fluffy, fun summer romance, and it has so much emotional depth to it. How are you going to bamboozle me like that? We're following Allie. And Allie is a recently divorced. She's in the midst of her divorce, and she has kids. She's a single mom. She's just at this hard point in her life. She has recently lost her mother, so there's a lot of trigger warnings for grief in this book that's heavily talked about. She can't wear big girl pants. She's not wearing like jeans or like dressing up. She's kind of just like she's in between a rock and a hard place at this time in her life. Motivation from her best friend, she decides to, like get up, make this summer a champagne summer, which if you read this book, you'll understand that, which I have now stolen. Hi, I've stolen that. I've now put that as a very important part of my life's motto for my summers, is to have a champagne summer. Obviously, when a book is 5-star, I take little parts of it and I weave it into my life because it's such an important book to me. She wants to kind of like make this summer a good one. She wants to like get back out there, so she decides to go on a date with this guy. And you think that's how the book is. This book has so much emotional depth. And something that I have noticed about this author's books is that they're all marketed as like a romance. And romance is definitely a strong supporting character and plot within this book. But I feel like in all of her books, we focus on something else like a whole lot as well. It almost reminds me of Emily Henry, where like, yes, the romance is strong, but there's like deeply emotional subplots in this book. So this one, it's again, grief, self-discovery, the fear of like falling in love again and like putting yourself out there and how scary that can be. Finding yourself no matter what age you are, because this main character, I forget what age she is, but she's like in her 30s. Basically, she's just trying to find herself. She feels very lost in life. First of all, if we want to talk about just the romance, the guy in this book is so amazing. The communication and the maturity that he has, but also the kindness that he shows not only to her, but to others. He's like a strong support system for her, no matter if they're in a relationship or not. He's just like a great guy. I loved that. Like, I love just a strong male love interest that is going to be strong no matter what. Like, even if they're not heavily in a romance, like he is just like a strong force within the book within itself, where you care about him as a character, not even just in the romance. Everything else about this book, her finding herself is so motivating, and you literally just find yourself rooting for her the entire time. Like, you are right there along with her, running alongside her on this journey to the finish line to find herself, just wanting to see her find that happiness again. Like, it's very, very, very deeply emotional. But also, there are literal quotes in this book. There's no happy ending to an unhappy story. You can't just keep doing what you're doing and wait for it to turn into something happy. You kind of have to look for the happy things along the way, which also really called me out, by the way. You get a dog and you know two things. You're going to fall in love with it and it's going to die one day. You knowingly walk headfirst into heartbreak. That's the basic madness of dog ownership. This book packs a punch. Emotionally, get ready to cry. And then I picked up Powerful because Reckless is coming out July 2nd, which I'm very, very excited for. And I have a little bit of an inkling feeling that I'm going to like Reckless more than I liked Powerless. I gave Powerless a 4.5 star, like it was literally almost a 5, but I feel like Reckless could be a 5 star for me because of where we're at in the story. Feeds a lot more to like my personal fantasy book taste. I needed to pick up Powerful before I picked up Reckless. Powerful, it's a fun novella, not too fun at the end. It's a fun novella that I just really enjoyed like escaping into. It was so quick and easy, and it was a 3 star for me because it was just like an enjoyable time, but I won't like think deeply about it like I do like Powerless and probably Reckless. But I feel like it's a very important and nice addition to the story. Next up, I read Love Unwritten by Lauren Asher because Love Redesigned, that is behind me somewhere, was actually, I think, one of my favorite reads of last year. I just really, really love it. I love Lauren Asher's books. I feel like she just gets it when I want to read a romance like this, you know, like she gets what I want. Love Unwritten, I gave this one a 4 stars. I literally had to make a TikTok because I was giggling out loud, and to the point where I've told the story so many times. Oh my god. I looked around my room, noticed that I was alone in my room, giggling at words on paper. And I feel like a good book has to do that to you, where you literally don't even feel real and you're just giggling at something that a fake character, sorry to break it to y'all, but these people are not real. Basically, you're following Ellie, and she is the nanny for the guy in this book. You're just kind of following that, honestly. You don't really get along at first. It's like grumpy. Well, it's kind of grumpy. Like, she's not like super sunshiny. He's very grumpy, and they kind of help each other heal. It's beautiful. I will say that just because I wasn't like head over heels, like in love with him, I felt like the book was a little bit too long. I definitely think I liked Love Redesigned. I think that was like a 4.5 for me. This one was a 4, still amazing. Still would recommend the series. It just felt a little bit too long. Next up, I picked up Unsteady because I had seen like somebody post about this book on TikTok randomly. Like, it just randomly got recommended to me. And from the quotes that they were posting, it gave like huge Johnny and Shannon vibes. And you guys know I love Johnny and Shannon. I was like, you know what? Yeah, like, let's pick up this book. And I had a really great time. I gave it a 3.5 stars. A sports romance. Basically, you were following the girl is a figure skater, and she kind of has this like traumatic family life that's going on behind the scenes. And the guy is a hockey player who recently just got back from like this big accident that he had on the ice. He is struggling with panic attacks, anxiety, mental health, and she has like a lot going on with her family, and they basically find each other in their time of need and help each other. I thought that it was honestly a really good story. Like, I was really in it, and I've thought about it so much after finishing it to where I've been like, is it a 4 star? Because like, I have not stopped thinking about that book. I feel like it was because they were so Johnny and Shannon coded. So if you want something like that in a sports romance, I would say pick this book up. And then the very last book that I read this month was A Novel Love Story, which is one of my most anticipated releases of this whole entire year, definitely the first half of the year. I gave it a 3 stars. I would still recommend this book. It's very cozy and fun. Like, the ambiance of this book, I feel like, is perfect for fall. I would even say like wait until the fall to pick this up, because I feel like this would really have hit so hard in the fall. It wouldn't have probably got the rating up, but atmospheric, it would have been really good. Basically, we're following Elsie, and she is at this point in her life where she just went through a bad breakup, and she's going off to this cabin to stay by herself. Usually it's like a trip with her and her book club, and nobody can make it this year, but she needs to go to the cabin. So she goes to the cabin, but on the way there's a bad storm. She has to break down in this town, and little does she know, it's a town from her favorite romance series that the author could no longer continue writing. She is literally in this, like, she's seeing the characters and stuff from the story. And here's the thing, that plot seems so fun and thought, like, I too, if you could put me in Chestnut Springs, Akatar, oh wait, that's like scary though. Because like, what if they would want me to like fight with them? I'm not made for that. If I too could be put with my favorite book characters and talk to them, yeah. I felt like, yes, there were themes of like finding love again and healing yourself when you have been scarred by somebody, by love, and helping people out along the way. And she kind of helps these characters to help herself realize these things. I just felt like the romance was non-existent until she needed it to like pop back up. It just felt like there was no connection with the two love interests like at all. I almost like would have preferred for it to literally just be like a literary fiction where she learns these things about herself and she is in this little magical world with these characters, and then just finds herself at the end and has a good little life at the end. Like, the fact that you threw in and marketed it as a romance and the romance is barely in it, and then throw it at the end, it was messy at the end. Really, at first I was like, ooh, it's gonna be like a 3.5 to a 4. The end brought it down to a 3. Those are all of the books that I read in the month of June. Let me know down below if you guys read any of these books, what you thought of them, if any of them are on your radar, or really anything you want down below. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you guys did, you guys know what to do. Like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff that you guys know how to do, and I will see you very soon for another video, or I'll see you when I see you. I don't know. Peace.